Hello, gorgeous. Today our mask is Queen Helene Mint Julep mask. Anything else I have to say about it, I'm going to have to say after it dries because I forgot to look before I took my glasses off. I'm once again, I promise this will be the last time, going to talk about my childhood because every time I do, then I realize, oh my gosh, there's more I wanted to tell you. So I'm going to start again. You've already seen this photo. This is a photo of Joe. But what you can't see, okay, back here behind him, you see the little garages there. There were 3 garages in a row, but behind those garages, there was a carport. And that's where Daddy kept his boat. He was a big into fishing. And finally, after I think many years of saving, bought himself this motorboat, which was not happy for me because all it did for me was make me barf. But anyway, he dearly loved it, and that's where it stayed. And I don't know if he had this dirt imported specifically for that carport, because the dirt in that little carport or shed, whatever you'd call it, was different than the dirt around the rest of the yard. It almost seemed like a mix of kind of East Texas red dirt and sand. And it was very prone to spiders coming up out of it. But anyway, in the back, the very back of this carport, there was bamboo growing outside of it, but you can't really stop bamboo, so some of it grew inside too. And in 1960, after the Jones family moved in, Kim told us that if you go out there and cut that bamboo when it's like between 2 and 3 days old and 6 to 8 inches tall, just slice it off at the bottom, or I don't know, I guess you could pull it up. But you can chop that up and put it in your salad, and it's delicious. So after that, for the next 8 years, bamboo was a regular component in the nightly salad. My mother was definitely into that whole food pyramid thing. We always had a little individual salad, which consisted of iceberg, lettuce, tomato, onion, and cucumber. And then after that point, bamboo. And also, at my bequest, we went on a mission to try every single salad dressing they had at the grocery store. Before that, she'd made just a simple kind of vinaigrette, but we did end up trying. I think it was when Green Goddess came out. It was like, oh my gosh, we tried it, and it's like there are all these other ones too. So I mean, we tried everything that was available at the time, and of course, determined that what Mama made was better than all of those, so we went back to having that. Anyway, the other thing about this carport, behind this carport, between and Joe's garage apartment, so like it would seem like a little alleyway almost, maybe 3 or 4 feet wide, between that and the house next door, which was the Shaftstall's house, where the Shaftstalls lived. There was this big pecan tree, and I'm not sure but what this might be, the pecan tree, but because of those 2 roofs, the roof of the Shaftstalls garage and the roofs of Joe's garage apartment, most of the pecans ended up in that alleyway. And so the Jones kids and the Benitez kids and any girlfriends visiting, we would all be dispatched to go out and pick pecans, which, you know, if you just have this one tree, it's kind of a chore. But in this case, it was never a chore because it was always just prolific, and it was all right there. And, you know, it'd be 6 or 8 inches deep out there. So you're out there with your little brown garbage bag. And so everybody had some to take home with them. And it was great. Now, while I have mentioned the Shaftstalls, and I'm going to show you a couple pictures you've probably seen before. This is me and Binky at Easter, but you can see the Shaftstalls house peeking out there in the back. And behind my car that I didn't get to have, there's the Shaftstall's house. You can see it's yellow brick. Very pretty little house. Anyway, the Shaftstalls had a daughter, Carolyn, who I'm thinking Carolyn was probably 10 years older than I was, 8 to 10 years older than I was. This is a picture of Carolyn in her high school years. But she was the always patient young lady who would put up with me, you know, have me over, play her Elvis records for me. And she put up with me when I forsaked. I took to the Beatles more than Elvis. And she's the one who was my chaperone when I went to see Herman's Hermits twice and Sam the Sham and the Pharaohs. She was very good friends with my cousin Bobby Sue. They went to high school together. So Carolyn and I have managed to stay in touch off and on through the years. Next door to the Shaftstalls, and I don't right offhand have a picture of their house, but Diane Varner lived. And she was one of my best girlfriends in junior high school before we moved. And when she would come spend the night at my house, we would sleep in apartment 4 because, as I told you, after my father determined to sell the house, as the apartments became vacant, he left them vacant. And I think apartment 3, which normally was my playroom, didn't have a bed in it. So we would spend the night in apartment 4. And also I would go to her house after school a lot. Her chore was cleaning up the dishes because her mother worked at home. And so she and I would talk while she did dishes, and we'd listen to the radio and sing along with all the songs. And I have to tell you what her mother did. It was very cool. Her father owned a photography studio. I think his parents and he owned it together. And they took these photographs that had to be tinted. And so her mother would sit in front of the TV all day, drinking coffee and tinting these photos. And at one point, I got to do 2 very simple tasks. These photos, I guess you understand, are matte, and you have these little paints, and you fold up a piece of tissue paper, and you take a dab of the paint. And what I was allowed to do was the background and the face. So you dab the little tissue paper in the paint, and you just rub it all over and rub it down really good. And then just a slight tinge, you know, a tint remains. And then the face. And then she and Diane got to do, to a lesser extent, some of the more complicated stuff, because then would come the process of removing where you'd gone into the margins and removing what bit you got on the hair and in the eyes and so on. But I would get paid a quarter per photo for what I did. So that was a very exciting deal to me at the time. I wanted to show you a picture. I mentioned across the street from the Shaftstalls. Yeah, kind of pretty much was where my Aunt Mellie and Aunt Lily lived. I actually found a picture of my Aunt Mellie and my Aunt Lily. And they are here, over here. That's Aunt Mellie, and that's Aunt Lily. And these people are the Runnels family, and that would be the child and grandchildren of one of them, but I'm not sure which. I think Aunt Mellie. And I, a couple years ago, through some genealogical research, got in touch with a cousin, Martha Runnels Gray. So I probably one of those babies is Martha. Okay, I mentioned that Kim's original husband, Elbert, passed away, and that sometime later, a couple years later, she married the next door neighbor, a gentleman named George Lawson, at which point she became the mother of 2 more kids because he was a widower. And I just wanted to show you these pictures of Jim and Leslie. So I love this photo. So this would be Kim with all her kids, both birth and stepchildren. I regret that I only have one photo of George Lawson. He was wonderful. He was really wonderful. And this is probably New Year's, but this is George from behind dancing with my daddy. I'm inclined to think this is New Year's because it would take a couple alcoholic beverages probably to get my father to be silly enough to dance with any guy. But obviously they were having a great time. Very sadly, George, I don't know. George was a printer by profession. He owned his own print shop, and he was driving back from Galveston or somewhere south of Houston with Elbert Jr. in the car, and had a stroke while driving and died. And Elbert chose never to drive as a result of that. I just want to show you a picture of my other best girlfriend in elementary school. This is Patricia Johnstone, and she lived about 4 or 5 doors down. Yeah, like 2 more houses down from Diane Varner. Gosh, these things just don't focus, do they? Nope. Gosh, I'm sorry, y'all. And this, I think, was probably Corrine's first day of school because it's me, Corrine, Binky, and Patricia. So I think, Binky walked us all to school. And that's probably, Kim probably took the photo. So this is me over here looking rather taller than I think I was. And Patricia with Binky. So having heard all about this, my house, and you know that, oh no, one more. I mentioned Bianca Rausch, Hildegard Barnett's granddaughter, that she and I have been in touch on Facebook. I have to tell her to come look at this. This is a Christmas card from the Rausches. Isn't that cool? So from this side, that's Carlene, Sue Rausch, Mr. Rausch, whose name was Jim, I believe, and Bianca. Isn't that great? I think they sent photos every year, and probably one day I'll turn up the rest of them. Okay, so in 1968, I mentioned that my father sold the house and we moved to the suburbs at that point. So instead of that beautiful house I loved so much, here's where we lived. Those 3 pine trees on the corner, we called that the magic triangle. And many times friends would come over and we'd sit there, under the magic triangle, and just talk and dream and plan. And that's a magnolia tree there in the middle. There had previously been a weeping willow, but it wasn't very healthy and it died, so Daddy put a magnolia there. But yeah, in 1968 we moved, and the house was purchased by a gentleman named Alan Loren Puffer and his partner Bob. And he bought it, I think, in July or August, and we had not bought a house yet. So we ended up staying there as renters until the Christmas holidays. And he ended up, renting out these apartments that for so long Daddy had left sit vacant. And I just wanted to tell you about apartment 5. A woman, I don't know her name, and her daughter Faye moved in. And Faye would have been about my age, maybe a little younger, but she had cerebral palsy quite severely, to the point that she was in a wheelchair, and most people couldn't understand what she said. But her mother could understand what she said, and I like to go upstairs and play with Faye, and I don't know what playing constituted except hanging out with her and talking to her, and I got to where I could understand Faye too. So that was a very good experience for me, because I'd never, I guess, really known a handicapped person before, and once I could understand what she said, Faye was just like me. Faye was just like anybody else. Another really cool thing is that Mr. Puffer loved plants, and he, out in the hallway in the common area of the house, he put a bunch of pot plants out there, and that was gorgeous and very cool. Many years later, when I lived in the apartment I rented from Victor Chin, one day I was driving by that house because it was in the same neighborhood, and Mr. Puffer was outside, so I stopped and identified myself, and he gave me the grand tour, and it was very, very cool to see the house, because he had turned apartments 2 and 3 into one large apartment for himself, and that was really neat. And all the guys that were at home allowed him to let me come in and see their apartments. Also, about the very same time, this house across the street, the red brick house, Miss E.T.'s house, my boyfriend Danny lived there. So that was so cool too. Here's a better picture of Miss E.T.'s house, except that it's black and white, but it was a red brick house. Anyway, Danny lived in that house. I mean, talk about small world. Hi, Danny. Anyway, in 85, I believe, I ended up buying a house, and it was there in the neighborhood, 1 block north and 3 blocks west, and was able to drive by my house every day. And very sadly, in 1985, it burned. Not entirely to the ground, but burned. And by that time, Mr. Puffer was a pretty severe diabetic, I believe, and just didn't have the wherewithal, or I guess have the health to make any attempt to rebuild. So he put the house up for sale. And when we found that out, my mother was interested in making an offer on the house. I think what she wanted to do was to get an inspector and get the inspector in there to see if it would be possible to rebuild it to how it had been. And if so, she wanted to purchase it, but we missed bidding on the house by a day. And the gentleman who purchased it put up 2 houses, 1 on each lot, and because it was 2 lots. And it's these houses that look like houses built in 1910, except that they're, twice as large, and so aren't nearly as charming. But it was nice to see something happen there anyway. And I don't know, my guess is that Mr. Puffer probably passed away not long after, because I forget who told me this. It might have been the people that bought the house, that he was such a severe diabetic that he wore one of these meters, that just kind of dispenses insulin all day long. That didn't sound good. But what had happened was the original wiring from 1919 apparently was still in that house. Can you imagine such a thing? So anyway, that's what happened. And that is the history of the Alkemeyer house. Through whoever bought it, then the Potters, then the Puffer. And Mr. Puffer, as far as I could tell, took really good care of it. And it's a beautiful house. Beautiful. Beautiful house. Beautiful growing up there. Beautiful family. Beautiful extended family. Okay. I'm going to go. Yeah, it's hard as a rock. I'm going to go wash this off, and then I'll come back and tell it what it was, tell you what it was supposed to have done, and if it did that. Hold that thought. I'll be right back. Hi, I'm back, and I'm very pink. All right, let's see what it says. Queen Helene. It's in French. Complexion solution. Deeply cleans and refreshes oily and acne-prone skin. I'm not oily anymore except in the T-zone. And I do get a zit from time to time. Our original all-time favorite green mask instantly absorbs excess oil, extracts impurities, and helps minimize the appearance of pores. After use, skin is deeply clean with a fresh, oil-free feel and healthy-looking complexion. So apply it over clean skin, avoid eye area, and take off after 5 to 10 minutes. All right, let me see. Let me check those pores. Oh, yeah. I see a couple places that I didn't get rinsed off that I need to go back and rinse off, but yes, the pores look deep cleaned. So this has been around. I swear I probably remember using this in high school, and it's good, old, reliable, and it is and has always been cruelty-free. I forgot to tell you that Miss Carpenter took me to see Maurice Chevalier when I was 8, and somewhere I have an autographed program. And I'm so forgetful. This is one of the ceramics that Hildegard Barnett made, and it's signed on the back. And this is one of the ceramics my mother made, and it's signed on the front. At the bottom, her nickname was Lulu. Her name was Maureen. Her nickname was Lulu. Anyway, there are much more of these around here. And I'm sorry to have gone on about this for 3 whole weeks, but it was beautiful. And you could count on. There are things you could count on. I love routine. I love regularity. I love that you could count on getting that box of candy from Garden Inn every year, and that every New Year's you could count on Mrs. Carpenter making tamales and Daddy buying sparklers and firecrackers, and that we would go to the Benitez's house and play card games and board games, and that Joe was there all the time to keep us safe, and that oh my gosh. Oh yeah, another thing, and this is maybe weird, the other delicacy we'd have on New Year's was pickled pig's feet. I wouldn't eat it now, but at the time I think I loved it. I love that we, the fact that you could count on we would always have a dog, and probably have cats too. I'll see you in a couple of weeks. Love y'all. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed, do it. And Cheryl will be posting a video too, telling us about something beautiful. Watch it. Love y'all. Bye.